Next up, we've got a discussion of section finances and budgeting. Marcy Jackson has been CFO for the Florida Bar for more than 5 years. Prior to her employment with the Florida Bar, she had nearly 30 years of experience in the areas of finance, accounting, auditing, administrative management. Marcy is an active Florida certified public accountant and has a master's degree in accountancy. Renee Thompson is an active leader in the Florida Bar and has received the President's Award 2 times while serving on the Board of Governors for her work as the inaugural chair of the Bar Leadership Academy. She is the 5th Circuit representative on the Board of Governors, serving as the budget chair for the Bar and liaison of Council of Sections. When I got through these bios, thank you, Dixie, and for providing these for me. I had to smirk when I saw Renee Thompson as an active leader in the Florida Bar. That's kind of an understatement if you know anything about Renee. She knows everything about everything, and I want to say thank you, especially because I think the animal law section would not exist without her. She is on our executive council and was instrumental in bringing the animal law section into existence, along with every single thing else she does. So with that, I'll turn it over to the two of you.
Thank you, Greg. I love our animal law section. You all are doing some fabulous work. It's a pleasure to meet with you all this morning. I get to talk about one of your favorite subjects, money. As he said, my name is Renee Thompson. I serve on the Board of Governors. I'm also your Council of Sections liaison, so please know that I'll be working with you very hands-on this year in multiple capacities, whether it's through the budget process or whether it's through our work here in the Council. So ultimately, we're going to talk about a few different things today. We have some frequently asked questions that we've seen basically year after year at these meetings. So we wanted to try to highlight what we hope to answer for you today. So, these are the topic areas that we're going to be covering. The first is, where do I get current financial information? How are my section funds invested? How does the section pay for Florida Bar services? How does CLE revenue split work? And what other fees do we pay to the Florida Bar? We'll also be looking at what is the section's budget due? When is it due, and how do we amend the original budget? And then, of course, we'll be taking questions as well. We have a font of knowledge with us today, which is our CFO, Marcy Jackson. So we encourage you all to not only hear what we have to say today, but as you have input and questions, we'll be here to help work through that, which is why we wanted to make sure to have a little bit of extra time to spend with you. One of the first things I wanted to tell you about the budget process is, as the Budget Committee Chair, I work with kind of a core group of people, I think there's 9 or 10 of us, that essentially prepares and reviews the financial statements of the Florida Bar to help prepare the budget for the next fiscal year. That process, I would say, starts in September? Around September. You as section leadership are going to have to start working with your administrators to prepare those budgets by certain deadlines within the bar. That is because ultimately your budget is approved by the Board of Governors. While we don't micromanage what it is in your budget, we still have to have a process in which all of that is published for the rest of the bar to see. So we'll talk about that more in depth, but I just want to share with you 2 dates on the front end. So if you hear nothing else from me this morning, please remember these 2 dates. The first is October 31st. October 31st is when your preliminary section budget is going to be due. So we're going to need to see something from your section around Halloween. All right. And then the second date is December 17th, which is right before the holiday, a week prior, right? So that time period is where we actually get kind of that final approval so that it can be put into the budget to go to the board meeting when we have our main budget meetings in Tallahassee in February. So there are lots of processes and steps along the way, but if you can just remember Halloween and right before the holiday in December, that those are 2 times of the year where we're going to be looking to your sections for those final budgets. And we're going to talk about that process more in depth as we go through this, but I just want to make sure to point those out on the front end.
Okay. First off, we wanted to make sure that you all knew where to go when you start trying to look for financial information. And you'll need that as you start working on your budgets, of course. So, of course, the first and primary source is going to be your section bylaws. And I do believe Dixie put all of, nope. Do they have the bylaws are in their book or not? I know the policies are. The bylaws are not. If you need a copy of your bylaws, your program administrator can provide those for you. The standing board policies of the Florida Bar are actually on our website, but I know Dixie has put it in your handbook for you as well. The 500 and 600 section policies are all about sections, section activities, and CLE activities, which are all section driven. So that's going to be your secondary source of information for where you go as to how things are to be handled from a financial perspective. Again, they're also on the Florida Bar website. If you can't find your little handbook, you can go out to the website. It's actually bundled with the rules, so that button that you click for rules will also take you to the standing board policy. Of course, you have an annual budget that gets approved and is actually published as well on each of the individual sections' web pages. We produce monthly statement of operations for each one of the sections that program administrators have access to. So if you're in the interim process of monitoring your budget and how much do you still have left to spend, or where you are financially in the year with revenues versus expenditures, your program administrator can provide you with whatever the latest dated statement of operation is. And let me already tell you, if you can't get your program administrator, please do not hesitate to call me. My phone number's in this handout. I am your CFO just like I am the bar's CFO. So please never hesitate to call me and ask me questions or hunt down information for you, okay? Again, by now you should all know who your assigned program administrator is. And here's where I put my direct line telephone number. So please make sure to write that down and give me a buzz anytime you need it.
And for those in the back, it's 850-561-5635.
Okay? Next thing we wanted to talk about is your investments. This seems to be one of the hot topics that I get asked every year. So let's talk about how we manage the investments. Renee, why don't you hit the whole total portfolio?
Sure. Our investment portfolio is kind of categorized by some different percentages. As you can see, the general funds make up about 59% of our portfolio. Your funds are over here in this 11%, you'll see. We have some certification funds, CSF funds, building and equipment, and some other small group funds as well. But the focus of what we're going to be talking about today with regards to section money makes up about this pie-shaped piece of our investment portfolio.
Yes, and our investment portfolio is what you would term, or you would hear called in the industry, a commingled fund. So we take everybody's money and we put it all together in one big pot, and that saves us administrative costs by and trading costs by putting everything in one big pot. But we track everything on our accounting system separately, so that at any point in time on a daily basis we can tell you how much of this fund actually belongs to you. Okay? So as you can see, all total, all of the sections together, all of your fund balances equal about 11% of the total $53 million we have in this portfolio. So it's a fairly large portfolio. Now, there is actual governance process over all of the investments. We have an investment committee, which is a board committee. Ian Comiskey is the chair of the investment committee. There's about 5 people on that investment committee, and the investment committee meets at every board meeting and looks over the current performance of the entire portfolio. They then follow and make adjustments to the portfolio based on an actual board-approved investment policy. If any of you would like to have a copy of the policy, shoot me an email, I'll send it to you. That policy actually outlines all of the approved asset classes that we can invest in, as well as the target ranges that we try to keep for diversification purposes. And there's actually ranges, so that as the market fluctuates, we aren't necessarily making changes all the time. We try to stay within those ranges. And we also use an investment advisor. So it's not all just bar members that are managing it. We actually have a professional investment advisor. It's Greystone Consulting, who works with us and helps us keep the policy up and does all of our trading for the portfolio.
And I would just add that Ian is one of our longest standing board members on the Board of Governors. So if you know him or if you've ever worked with him, I mean, he's been doing this upwards of 19 years. I mean, he has a wealth of knowledge and can assist you at every step of the way with understanding how we do our investments and portfolios. So if you do reach out to him, schedule a conference call. I say that because he's a good talker, and he will get in depth with you if you want to.
Okay. Whoops, I went one too far. I did want to talk about the daily activities and how we manage the cash. So we keep part of the portfolio is in what's considered to be a short-term portfolio. That's where we keep our cash needs for the next 12 months. So basically think of that as your operating checking account. We just don't leave it sitting at the bank because it doesn't earn anything at the bank. So we shift it off and put it in a short-term portfolio and bring it back. We manage cash every day. Every day we sit down and figure out what the deposits are, what our cash needs are, and we manage our short-term cash on a daily basis, moving money in and out of that investment portfolio. It gets up to around $16 million, I would say, after we've collected most of the dues and fees for the year, and then it dwindles down to about $2 million by the time we invoice again in April. So again, somebody spends a significant amount of time managing that cash on a daily basis. And what we do is, as you collect fees, the money goes in. As you pay your bills, the money comes back out. Your money is all part of our money. So while you have a separate fund balance and it's tracked on our general ledger separately, from a cash perspective, it's all one big account. And then at the end of the month, we figure out how much is yours and how much did we earn that month? How much did we make off of the trades that we executed? And how much did our mark-to-market change on the portfolio value? And we prorate it based on your balances. So everybody earns the same thing. We all win and we all lose at the exact same rate.
Our section management fees, this is something, of course, that's going to be of interest to you as a section leader. It's important to know that we kind of look at this into two separate categories. The first thing we look at is when we talk about some basic support that our administrative processes provide, and the other is CLE. So we're going to talk about those two separately. The first is the administrative support. That's going to include all of the staff time that is calculated for basic administrative activities for any section, any accounting requirements, and then just general office administrative overhead. That would include phones, anytime you do conference calls, if there's any type of technology that you use, anything that goes into that. We account for that in a separate area than we account for with regard to our CLE events. There is a form, just so that you all are aware of it, that your administrators use, and it's called the Section Management Fee Determination Form. It looks at the beginning of the year when you begin your budgeting process, what you think you're going to do during the year. So they actually ask you, how many meetings are you going to put out? How many newsletters are you going to utilize? Are there going to be audio events? Are there going to be webcast events? I mean, what is it that you believe you're going to need as a section leader to do your job to reach your membership? And there's an actual formula where they talk about how many of them are planned, and it goes through a long list, and then we just basically rate that by paying section member. And let me repeat that, paying section member. You are not charged administrative fees for non-paying section members. So please understand that if you have a paid section member, that's where your rate is calculated from. There are also some special project areas. If there is something you are doing that is only done once, maybe you're doing a directory. I mean, maybe there's something out there that you're planning on doing that your section doesn't normally budgeted for. There is a space there that you write into this form that essentially talks about what type of extra staff time might be utilized, because it's important from the bar's perspective to help manage how much staff time is going to be utilized for any particular section, because you remember not all sections have administrators. They share administrators across the board. So it helps with staffing, it helps with how we manage these section fees, but more importantly, it helps you because you're going to know on the very front end what the estimate and cost is going to be when you try to work up what events you're planning, how many meals you're doing, how many people you're planning on reaching throughout the year, to try to create an accurate budget for your membership. And that's important. That's an important part of this process when we are trying to determine on the front end what it is you're going to be doing as a section.
Renee, I wanted to ask you, first of all, is that form contained in this blue handbook, or is it somewhere on the website?
I can give it to you.
And I was just curious to look at it. And second, what's the timeline on that form? Should my program administrator have already done that? Or is that something that we should be having a conversation
it's part of
about
our budget,
ongoing?
Yeah, it's part of the budget process. So
Okay.
as you all move forward from this meeting, because this is really where you hear about it, you'll be working with your program administrator to help fill that out, because it helps us create your fiscal budgets going forward.
Okay, that's fine. So the fact that I should not be panicking.
You should
over
not
the fact
be
that
panicking.
This is something.
Somebody
this is
did
brand
it
new
for you
information.
before you showed up today.
Very
So
much.
yeah, these forms are meant to help your section organize your year from a budgetary perspective. So that's the first planning form I want to make sure you're aware of.
Yeah, I want to spend a little bit more time going over that form and that activity in a little bit more detail so you feel a little bit more comfortable about it. At one point in time, the way the sections reimbursed the bar was very convoluted and not very transparent. So we did a major overhaul a couple of years ago and came up with this new simplified way for sections to know in advance how much their administrative fees were going to be for the year. Trying to take the surprise out of the back end and give it to you on the front side. I'm getting some big smiles over here because some of you lived through that with me. So what we basically did was realizing that not all sections are the same, right? You all do different things, and you do it at different levels of intensity, frankly. And so we had to come up with something that would work for everybody. So we took all of the section activities and kind of chopped you up into 3 categories. You either are, and when I say low, please don't think that this means really low, because low is high. But there's a low level of effort required to support a section. There's really a medium set of level of effort that's required to support a section. And then you have the reptiles, who are like, way out there, high level of effort. And some call that, high maintenance, but I didn't say that. But anyway.
We call them superstars. It's okay.
So basically, that's why we came up with this form. And the form has all of the activities that every section undergoes, and it allows it to be weighted based on how many of them each section plans on doing during their budget year. And this is prepared at the time the program administrator starts working on the draft version of the budget for their section, okay, for the next year. So they'll start working on this in September, October. Okay, so they'll be getting with their leadership and they'll be coming up with this plan. The vast majority of our sections are at the low end. We have a few in the middle, and we have a couple at the high end. And those rates are published as part of the annual budget process. They're $18 per paying member at the low end. They are $19.50 and $20.75 at the high end. Okay, so again, this was designed so that you could all know ahead of time how much your administrative charges were going to be. And this covers every basic activity that a section has, with the exclusion of CLE activities. CLEs are a whole different animal, so we carved them out. Okay? Does this make sense? Yes, ma'am.
If your paid members are at a certain level on day 1, and then they go up and down and all over the place, is there a set date that you determine the paid members?
This is actually collected at the time the fees are paid. So if you don't get paid, I don't get paid. Okay? Actually, when a check comes in, we actually carve it out. And part goes to the bar and part goes to the section.
Craig?
I've got a question. Maybe this isn't the exact right time to raise it, but I know that in prior council section meetings and in some of the section meetings, we've talked a lot about affiliate memberships, particularly of law students, and giving those folks free memberships, kind of like we do for incoming attorneys. How does that work with the management fee? And is that
if they're free, the bar does not collect any administrative.
It's only on paid members.
Only on paid members.
If they pay it.
So as sections, are we allowed to promote that to law students and say, you can join our section for free? Or
that is up
there
to
a
each
cap,
section to decide. Yes.
Okay.
If your bylaws permit it.
If your bylaws permit it, yes. Yes, sir.
So to follow up on what Greg says, if we charge somebody X and we give a discounted rate of X minus Y for certain categories, are we nonetheless charged the same by the bar?
The administrative fee is the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you need to always charge at least enough to cover the administrative fee. Now, let me also say, and keep in mind, by standing board policy, The bar is also supporting the sections. The bar covers the first $10 of the first 1,000 members and $5 of every member after that before this $18 even kicks in. Okay? So there's a base commitment from the bar to the sections every year as part of the budget, and then these rates are calculated to grab the rest of what it costs to support the sections. Okay? All right. Now we're going to go to the big monster.
Your CLEs. I mean, this is your part of your revenue clearly as a section, so it's important to kind of understand how the bar looks at your CLEs for the purposes of categorizing them for fiscal purposes. The first category you're going to see on this chart are joint sponsored CLEs. If you are utilizing the access to 24/7 on-demand post-marketing sales of your CLE, it has to be jointly sponsored, as you know, with the CLE Committee of the Florida Bar. That is part of standing board policy. And then, of course, you have section-sponsored CLEs as well. Section-sponsored CLEs are not necessarily 24 access on demand, but maybe you have post-market sales of just books or CDs or DVDs or however you're doing it. They can just be done within your section. They're not jointly sponsored with the CLE committee. And then you have section service programs. When you have a section service program, which is truly for membership education, you are not charged any type of management fee when you do that. And so you just need to be aware when you're talking about internal type CLEs, the management fee changes in that. So if you have a section that is fully responsible for the revenue and expenses of this particular CLE. There's no post-market sales. It is truly just for education of your membership. They come in, they do the education, and you're done. You're not going to have to worry about management fees on this type of service program.
Okay, so as we can tell, there was a reason why we needed to kind of identify these different types of CLEs. If you're jointly sponsored program with the CLE committee, you're revenue sharing with the bar, right? So the administrative fee, which there are actually 8 different administrative fees, which were designed and calculated, again, to try and capture the amount of effort required for the type of CLE event it is. And we have a wide variety of CLE events. We have some that are at the Ritz-Carlton with lots of BEOs, and they take 2 or 3 days, and there's just a massive amount of registration and administrative work, and they have lots of speakers. So the office systems folks are pulling together lots of bios and paperwork and PowerPoints and all that kind of stuff. So that's at the highest rate, and the highest rate is actually $1,700 per program hour. But that's it. It's all inclusive. It's the program administrator's time. It's the accounting department's time. It's it. We did this so that your CLE chairs could calculate in advance what the expenses were going to be so they could charge enough registration fee to cover it. Okay? So there are actually 8 of them. And it goes all the way from that highest level, most intense, humongous CLE event down to we're just having a 1-hour webcast at lunchtime. And all we're going to do is use the video conferencing equipment. Okay? It still has registration, so we still have some accounting time involved in there, and we still have IT who's got to set up the video conference, but it's fairly low maintenance. So that rate's $400 per program hour.
So the purpose of telling you about this is so much of the transparency issue that the sections were asking for had to do with this overhead. So you are able to use this budget planning form to essentially not only detail what it is you're going to do with your CLE, you're going to be able to fit it into one of these categories, whether you are doing a CLE at a contracted venue with food or whether you're just doing an audio webcast. You're going to know on the front end what the bill you're going to receive from the Florida Bar is with regard to this administrative fee prior to doing your CLE. So when you actually sit down to figure out how much you're going to charge your membership, you're going to know your profit level here. Because it's always been a challenge in the past to create a profitable CLE for a section if you don't know what all the bills are before you go in. So this form was designed to create kind of a one-stop shop for section leaders to say, okay, I want to do this type of CLE. These are the costs that are associated from the bar. These are my overhead issues. And then you know that going in so that you can actually set your prices at a targeted level.
Yeah, I just had one quick question. When you said at the highest rate, the $1,700 per hour, is that per hour for the number of, like, if it's 7.5 CLE credits? It's a program. Oh, for the program. Okay, thank you.
So yes, that rate's based on the number of program hours, because that way it actually includes the setting up and the tearing down and all that kind of stuff. So it's program hours, not just CLE hours. Okay, let's see. And I did want to take a second to talk about, like I said, the jointly sponsored, you're sharing revenue with the bar, revenue and or loss. If the program's a loss, the bar picks up a percentage of the loss. If you pick the section sponsored CLE, the section is carrying the full financial burden of that event. So it's in the section's budget, actually. And then the section service program is truly meant to be, it is purely nothing but a section service. It's the hook to get them to come to the meeting. You know, we're going to throw in an hour or two of CLE along with it. So now we had to get creative here. Because sometimes you guys like to invite other sections to come along, you know, and so what we have that, fee differential that we charge non-sections. So we made them, if you really want it to be a section service program and not have to pay a fee for it, then that person's got to join your section. So that section differential goes to the fee, the dues for that year instead of section differential, okay? So if you want to get away with not having the management fee and you want to invite non-members to your event, they got to join. So that's kind of a win-win for both of us. You get more members and I get to keep the little bit of the administrative part of that annual fee. Okay? All right. So let's move on. Yes, sir.
On the CLE, one of the things I think that we've struggled with was being able to tell if we've made money on something versus our monthly financials. That number is not always going to be captured in that. And you start off with a loss, and then over the time, if it's aftermarket, at the end, hopefully you're turning a profit. What's the best way to request those sorts of financial documents from you all that show how a CLE did, and at what point should we be requesting those documents?
Okay. Treat CLE, true jointly sponsored CLE events, like they're a separate business unit. We actually pull a separate financial statement on those individual events. Okay? And so, yes, you need to expect that it is going to take time to recover the full cost. Typically, at a live event, it isn't the registration fee that covers all the expenses. It is usually the post-market, and it can take 18 months to actually turn that profit. Not usually, I would say probably, 8 to 9 or so, Terry, to recover some of that. But we do have separate statement of operations on each one of those CLE events that we can pull and give to you. I mean, we pull them, it's just not something, because they cross fiscal years, it gets a little bit confusing. But we can absolutely pull them and pull all 18 months together if we need to for you. To look at any individual event that you would like to look at. Because keep in mind, when it's jointly sponsored, it's really a separate thing. And when we get to the bottom, we share the revenue. So each month, as we go in and look at those, you're going to get your 80% of whatever that month's activity is. So if that month it lost money, you get 80% of the loss. And then the next month, when it finally gets back, you get 80% of that too. So it ebbs and flows in your section reports based on what happens in the CLE event. And I know that can get a little confusing.
And I really encourage you, if you're using the 24/7 on demand, to utilize Terry Hill's depth of knowledge in this area. He's been working with this company for a very long time and can help you maximize profit and how you are putting these things up on this system. I can tell you, at least from the young lawyer's perspective, when we started breaking up our CLEs into 1-hour segments and the ability for our membership to do things in not just 8-hour blocks, which is the way CLEs used to be. You had to sign up for 8 hours or you couldn't watch anything. When we started to get a little more creative about how we published our CLEs, we found a lot more people found the time to watch them on the on-demand system. It's an incredible system. If you haven't used it, I hope you give it a shot as a section leader, because I think our membership really needs it, especially with the schedules that lawyers keep. We had a question in the back and then one here.
Are the details on the budgeting in the printed materials that we have or somewhere printed that we can share with our CLE chairs in the sections?
The budget planning forms you're talking about?
The forms or the details of how the administrative fee varies depending on the type of
Well, these
program.
materials that we're talking about here today are available to you. So you have a copy of this.
But they're not in the printed materials that we already have.
They're not in the section handbook,
So
no.
where do we get them?
Did you say you're going to publish the PowerPoint?
The PowerPoints are all published, as far as I understand, after today. So you will have a copy of this to share with your section leaders.
Not only will you have a copy of the PowerPoints that are shared and the forms that are shared, but a copy of the video will also be linked to on that slide as well, and everybody will get a link to that.
Great. One more question here. Rob.
Marcy, in connection with the posting of expenses for live programs, 1, 2, 3-day programs, how long, two questions. One, how long should it take for all of those expenses to be posted so that you know you've got everything posted and now the only other expenses relate to aftermarket and the cuts with the bar? And then the second, what can the sections do better to help facilitate that? Because I have a feeling those in leadership, we probably don't think of things we can do to speed that process up. Our administrators, I'm sure, are working their hardest to get it done, but I have a feeling section leadership may not be doing the best job we can do.
Well, actually, unfortunately, it takes a good 30 to 60 days after the event has happened before your hotels and your vendors all get their bills in. We do our best to try and issue the purchase orders and capture as much of that as an estimate as we can, but it really does take a good full 60 days probably after an event has happened before you've got enough of your expenses in. Please encourage those that are speakers that are getting reimbursed to get their speaker expenses in. Those of you that are kind of coordinating those type of things, that seems to be one of the biggest hang-ups. We do not charge the administrative fee, though, until the event happens, so that if it gets canceled, we're not doing that. So, it does take a good 60 days after an event has happened before we can get a picture of how much post-market we need to make up.
And by saying the 60 days, would that maybe 3 months later on your financial statement? So maybe in 90 days to reflect on your financial statement.
But it's important. I mean, when you're scheduling things, guys, you need to remember the end of fiscal year is the 30th of June. So if you want things to reflect on your budget, they need to be submitted pursuant to the end of the fiscal year. So, submitting them post the 30th, can affect how your budget is projected for the following year. So just always keep that in mind in planning purposes, as well as making sure to get as much in as possible by the end of that fiscal year.
Okay. Yes. Oh, more. Hang on. I think they need a microphone so that it can be recorded.
There you go. So for the jointly sponsored CLEs, that provides the 24/7 on-demand post-market sales. For the section sponsors, it's a limited post-market sale. What's the bar seeing from the amount for section sponsored of the limited sales for a CD or DVD? Because I've had
Excuse me, I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
What type of revenue is the bar seeing from members purchasing CDs or DVDs for a section sponsored event? Because I've had members that will say, we see something, but we're not buying it because it's on a DVD, and I don't have a DVD player, I don't have access to look at that, so I'm not just buying the CLE class. Is there any way for the section to have that 24/7 on demand without it being joint sponsored?
No.
Okay.
No.
I mean, is that something other sections?
It's a
see
policy.
as an issue with not having members purchase COEs because they're only available post-market on a CD or DVD basis?
That's a choice that you make when you set up your event. You as the leaders have a choice. Do you want to do it jointly sponsored and be able to put it on the 24/7 on-demand catalog? Or do you want to keep all of your revenue and run it only through your section and limit your marketing?
And sometimes it's just materials. I mean, it's not just DVDs or CDs. Some people just want materials from that particular meeting. So there is a demand for it if it's for materials. If you're trying to recreate the entire seminar, most people are going to want it on demand, though.
And I will say, too,
surprisingly, while I've been saying for 7 years that we're going to see a decline in CD and DVD sales. Surprisingly, we're still doing about $1 million a year in CD and DVD sales across the bar, across all the different categories. So there is a need for it. Again, at some point it's going to dry up. We probably still have people who request cassette tapes and VHS tapes, but there's still people. We're still selling them, and we scratch our heads every year when we're looking at budget to see if it's ever going to start declining. But there's nothing has given us any indication that it's going to decline. Similarly, we've thought that printed course book sales were going to decline, and since we transitioned to electronic course materials as part of the regular registration, and that hasn't been the case either. There's still a demand for purchased printed electronic course books.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to quickly cover, because I get this, well, if I'm paying you all this management fee, why are there other things that I'm having to reimburse the bar for? Well, there are still some direct costs that the bar passes along to you because they're not considered general overhead. Like when you accept credit cards, we pass along the credit card fee for that to you. When you have your own unique conference call, we charge you for the conference call. We don't charge you for the base access to the phone system because that's in your management fee, but your conference call is actually billed separately to your section. If you need some weird, funky office supply something or another because just you wants it, it's not part of our general supply catalog, then you pay for that. Okay, so your direct expenses get billed directly to your section. If it's an overhead, just part of having an office, that's all covered in your management fee. And then, of course, we talked about those little special projects that always pop up. We try to handle those on a one-off basis. I sit down literally with the program administrator. We figure out what all is involved. We come up with a reasonable cost. We share that with the leadership. Y'all will know what that cost is when you start doing your budget. Okay?
All right, section annual budgets. Your executive council needs to approve your budget before submitting it to my budget committee. That happens prior to December. So when you look at the timelines for what happens, I need your final budgets. That was that December 17th deadline that I told you about on the front end. So you need to work with your executive council prior to December 17th. So look at your meetings, figure out what meeting that's going to take place at. But your executive council has to approve your budget for the following fiscal year. That's because I have to have it in order to get it up to our Tallahassee meeting, essentially, which happens in the spring, and we have to publish when we have these different variations of our budget. So I have publication deadlines, we have committee deadlines, all of it has to be put into one whole budget for the entire bar so we can look at our total revenue and expenditures across the board. The final approval of all budgets is then issued by the Supreme Court. That's done in the month of June. So you can see this is an entire year process. As you're doing all your programs and events, the staff is working diligently behind the scenes to make sure that the budgets are in place for next year, to get them to the court so that once the budget's submitted, we have everything by the end of our fiscal year to start our new Florida Bar year in July 1. So if I'm asking for things from you, it's because the court needs them. Understand that when the bar asks for these things, it's not because we're trying to make things onerous. It's because the court requires it. The court requires it to have it ultimately when they issue their June opinion in order to set our budget for the next year, July 1.
Okay, this is one thing that the legislative crew wanted me to make sure you guys all understood, and I heard them talk to you about y'all having your own legislative consultants. So again, let me reiterate, you can use dues and revenues for legislative activities so long as your total budget is not negative. Okay? You can or not, up to you, decide to budget an operating reserve within your budget. Used to be you had to have an operating reserve. We've decided that's really a choice you should get to make, depending on how your section operates. If you feel more comfortable setting aside $10,000 for the unexpected throughout the year, please set aside $10,000 for the unexpected, and we can work with that. If it's just a waste of time, don't bother, because the way we operate and the way we track budget amendments, and we'll talk about that in a minute, you've got two different ways to do that. So we're completely leaving that up to you. But it used to be it was required, so I wanted to make sure you realized it's no longer required. It's suggested. If you want to do it, please feel free to do so. And that last but not least, there's one other little nuance here that your budget needs to include. If you're doing jointly sponsored CLEs and you as a section choose to reimburse your speaker with something other than what's outlined in the CLE policies, which is 6.4.
Got it.
6.4, then you need to include it in your section budget, and you need to actually identify it as being speaker expenses in excess of the CLE policies, okay? CLE policies, to be quite honest, are pretty liberal. I mean, they're pretty reasonable.
We don't pay for family.
We don't pay for families to come. And we don't provide honoraria to bar members. We will pay, you can pay an honoraria to a law faculty member, but you can't pay one to a bar member. So if you go outside of those, then you've got to put it in your section budget and you need to disclose it. And then budget amendments.
I was just going to say, our committee deals with these all year long. So if you have questions, please pick up the phone and call me. I'm going to give you my cell phone number right now. It is 352-208-3896. I will get you to the right person to help you answer any questions I cannot personally answer. But this process of section amendments is what our committee does all year long, making sure that your budgets are in line so that you at the end of the year aren't in a deficit. That's our job, to make sure that you all are operating above the red line.
Right. So again, that last sentence said that you could submit budget amendments anytime throughout the fiscal year. It does have to stop when the fiscal year is over. You can't,
June 30th.
At the end of your fiscal year, decide you were over budgeting something and submit a budget amendment. That's too late, okay? So, again, please submit your budget amendments throughout the fiscal year. That's why we do the monthly reports, and that's why we monitor and manage the budgets. But we do ask, that the leadership buy into the budget amendment. It isn't just, something that's being shifted around. But the way the policy's written is that only the budget amendments that are exceeding your budget amendment authority is what we call it. And that is an actual two-pronged formula. It's either you have budgetary authority up to 10% of your total disbursements or 30% of your ending fund balance. So there's this range. As long as your budget amendment's within those range, it's an executive director amendment. We sign off on it. We move the money around. It's no big deal. When you go outside of that range, it has to go to the Board of Governors for approval. I think in the 5 years I've been here, maybe 2 have ever really gone up all the way up to the board for approval. Okay? Most of the time, you're going to be within your amendatory authority. You're going to be fine. Just know that is the range.
But if you find that you are outside of this range, you need to let somebody know. Because those are the things that, like I said, have to get on board calendars. So that's why I'm giving you my number. Tell us in advance so that we can get these things in process and in work so that you're not held up from our perspective.
Okay, that's it.
So that's kind of a general overview of what your fiscal responsibilities are as a section leader. I'll remind you of those 2 dates again. The first was Halloween, which is October 31st. That's when you're going to do your preliminary section work for your budget, and then you'll have your final budgets to us December 17th. As you have questions, please feel free to reach out to your section administrators, to Marcy, to myself, any way that we can help make your job easier, we're happy to do. Our budget committee works very hard to make sure that all the funds of the Florida Bar are utilized in the best possible way, and we want to make sure that you as a section leader can tell your section memberships that you're being fiscally responsible with their section dues as well. So anything we can do to support you, please let us know. But we hope this was helpful to at least explain how the Florida Bar's process works so that we're all talking the same language when we do go through this through the next year. Okay, thank you.